welcome to Your Business, Your Wealth. My name is Paul Adams, and today is special. Now, it's not just special because Corey's joining us, but that always is special. But it's special because Corey is right here in the Seattle area, in studio today, joining us for the episode. Corey, I certainly am glad that you could make the journey over.
It's fun to be in your new HQ. Last week I was showing you up with beautiful views behind me, and so I wanted to make up for that and just be right here.
Well, I'll tell you, it is. This is how we used to record everything. We did it all in
almost
person.
Forgotten, yeah.
Yeah.
This is a lot better than that original setup, and the fact that it took us 2 hours to set it up every single time, and
lighting,
then take it down. Oh,
episodes would fail because our software at the time was less than ample. Mm-hmm. And now one thing I'm going to get used to, everybody, is I'm so used to talking to all of you and to Corey by looking at the camera, but I get to look at Corey here. So if you guys notice me not knowing where I'm looking, let me just apologize in advance. And let me tell you what we have in store for you today. We have some incredible articles we're going to look at. We're going to talk about retirement in America and where the media, I don't even want to say they get it wrong. I think they're trying to do the right thing and encouraging people, but sprinkling maybe some stats in there that aren't super effective. So we're going to talk about that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about these inflation yield, investing in tips, these inflation protected securities,
or
especially when they're bundled in mutual funds. Yeah, or are they? So we're going to be going to that the rates of return you see on those funds may not actually be the returns on those funds. And then last but not least, if you're leaving a large corporation and you have stock inside of that plan, or you even know anybody who does, you want to definitely see the third story we're going to talk about today, because we're talking, for some people, hundreds of thousands of dollars of saved taxes. So with that, Corey, you ready to jump into the first one?
Do it.
All right. Let me see if I can push my magic button. And sure enough, it worked. Let's just start here. Jaw-dropping stats about the state of retirement in America, Corey.
There are some jaw-dropping stats. The first one, of the 47.8 million Americans aged 65 and older, the average income is only $38,000.
Yeah.
And their average net worth is $170,000. Although, and they say with numbers like that, saving for retirement can be challenging. Although, if you're already 65, wait, what saving are you like?
Yeah, what are you
saving for?
It's a little bit like I told him at the CrossFit gym, Corey. I'm 42 years old now, and I said, all the rest of you guys have been working out, lifting weights your whole life. I said, I've dabbled, but I've never really done the damage to my body you guys have done. So I'm going to go for a peak at 50 strategy for my physical well-being. Mm-hmm. Maybe some people are doing that with their money. They're like, I'm going to get real serious about setting money aside as soon as I reach retirement.
I think there's a stat later on in this article about you may not have as long to work as you think, that I think is going to be important there. Like, some people don't have the gym membership in front of them that you do.
Yes. Yep.
I do like this. Young people think they'll retire early until they're older. So for those who haven't read the article, when they're real young, folks are like, this is going to be great. I'm going to retire in my 60s, maybe before. And then once they hit 30, they're like, oh, real life is coming in. Now, what's funny is this is unique for this generation, because earlier generations didn't expect to retire before 65.
Right.
That's when their pensions started. So they were just working this whole time. And I think the 401k came in and gave a full generation of people this thought that, oh, I can retire even earlier than I thought I could, except they weren't doing the work necessary. They weren't taking those steps in the 401k. They didn't realize, oh, it's all on me now.
Oh, yeah.
And now another generation is saying, oh, I could do this. Like, I remember being in high school and reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and thinking, oh, I just buy 3 investment properties with someone else's money, and then I'll retire at 40, and this will be amazing.
Yeah, it'll just be great. Well, and to point you guys to what Corey's looking at, it's this paragraph about 4 or 5 down. According to Gallup poll, 18 to 29-year-olds were interviewed about retirement. They expressed optimism they'd be able to retire early, but closer to their early 60s. However, once they hit 30, that optimism waned, perhaps due to the realities of making a living catching up with them. And I think the funny thing is, it's not making a living that hurts them. It's making the spending.
Right.
Now, for some households, the budgets are so tight, it's not like they have a lot of excess to set aside, etc. So we're not besmirching that at all, but rather just saying for those people who have any degree of margin, what they're usually doing is borrowing money to buy something. Now, the thing that people aren't thinking about often is that when you go out and buy something like a car, let's say, the car is not collateral. They're taking a lien against your future income.
They'll take the car back, don't get me wrong, but that's not
just
what they're borrowing on.
That's right. That's the social evidence or proof. You want to avoid embarrassment, having your car towed from the work parking lot. Like, people freak out about that. Appropriately so. Same thing with a home. They're not lending on the home. They're lending against your future ability to earn. And for those of you listening who have a bunch of assets and have ever tried to get a home loan without a job,
right?
Or
the
just
bank, a line of credit on the equity in your home if you don't have a job at the moment.
Yeah, they just ask all kinds of questions, and you have to provide different sets of detail because they can't lend against your income. Now, so the jaw-dropping stats, and I think one of the biggest is covered right at the beginning, and we're going to get to this in a second, with Americans living an average of 78.7 years. So I want everybody to remember that, 78.7 years, because we're going to talk about how long people are actually living versus the average length of living. But while we're talking about how long people will live, let's talk about how much money you ought to have in your retirement account according to Jamie Farkas. This is Yahoo Finance. It's a 7-minute read. We won't read the whole thing to you guys, but I've found that very funny for years that they tell us how long it's going to take to read. So they're going to give us retirement amounts for ages 30, 40, 50, and 60. And I would think it's some degree of we're going to get you up on plane, and at least that's what I would think reading this article. How much should you have saved? So one, they're going to should all over us. You should do this, you should do that. But second is they're going to say if you get to this number and this number, the implication is that then you will be okay in old age and for the rest of your life. And they're doing it as a multiple of the income that you're earning. So at age 30, they say 1x your earnings. Now, you're probably earning less in your 30s than you're going to earn in your 40s and 50s.
That makes sense.
So, yeah, maybe, and especially because people are just getting it together or just getting out of school,
it's
etc.
not linear. It's a compounding curve, so that makes sense.
It does, but I'm going to skip to the end because I just realized as we walk it through, it occurs to us like it's normal to think this way. And in our heads, we kind of have the exponential chart. And it's like, wait, 1x at my 30s doesn't make sense given my income is going to triple by the time I'm in my mid 40s. Plus there's inflation. Plus I need a decent amount of assets. It's more. But this is the big one. By age 60, you should have 7 times your annual earnings saved for retirement.
So if you made $100,000 a year, you should have $700,000 in your retirement account.
Which do perfect sense because at a 4% distribution rate, Corey, that's $28,000 a year. So I was just making $100,000. Now I'm just going to lifestyle adjust, retire on 28% of my pre-retirement earnings. Seems like a winning strategy. Now, the thing, sorry, I'm going to be a little bit pithy today. In the other article we were looking at, if you guys wanted to download and read that one, you can follow the link in the description here. But it talks about where did people get how much money they should have for retirement. And they're like, oh, they get it from opinions. They get it from friends. Somebody said a financial advisor. Some of them said I did a calculation. I call bull.
Well, let's say.
I think I would say if somebody said to me, an area I'm not expert in, say body fat percentage. Somebody said, I said, well, I want to be at 15% body fat. And somebody said, how'd you come to that number? Well, I guess I could say I calculated it. Or I could say I had a personal trainer tell me that's what I should shoot for. Or I could say, and all of them involve, I don't know what I'm talking about. But the funny thing is, when you're being interviewed or somebody asks you a question like that, you answer, and instantly, as soon as you give an answer, you actually have the boost of confidence, like, I actually know what I'm talking about.
Right. And you're on TV or you're on a podcast, and so now you're an authority.
Quoted in an article that was broadcast all over the world. I'm sorry, I cut you off there.
Well, yeah, if you're 60 and you're going to retire at 65 is your goal, and you're making $100,000 and you're following this rule, so now you have 700,000. Let's say you're saving 20% of your income, so that's $20,000 a year. In 5 years, even if you got a 10% rate of return per year, you're only at $1.2 million. Now you'd need $2 million to replace that $80,000 you were living off of on a 4% distribution rate.
Well, and for everybody listening, I just want to make sure you caught the math Corey did. If you're making 100 in the example, which we love using $100,000 because it's very easy math to do in our heads for all of you.
I need it to be really easy math to do it that fast.
Then if you're setting aside $20,000, clearly you're not spending that. So your amount of income you need to replace is $80,000.
Yep.
So even if it's $80,000, you said, Corey, and you have $1.2 million, what's that shake out to be?
Well, if you're living off of $80,000, you would need $2 million
just to pull off the $80,000.
To pull off the $80,000 a year. And over that next 5 years, if you continue to put $20,000 a year away and even get an 18% rate of return, you're only at $1.7 million. I'm just going to see what kind of rate of return you would need. 20% rate of return per year for the next 5 years to get to 1.92 million.
No, I'm just going to go back and check the article because I'm sure they mentioned that. So let me just scroll down here a second. No, they don't say take 20% risk to get from 7 times your annual income to enough to replace it. They actually say reduce risk. Well, maybe when we get to this thing about inflation protected securities, we can find out how to get 20% safely, but I don't think so.
Let's keep moving through this article so we can.
Well, and just so that everybody sees it, age 50, they say 5 times your income. So let's just put that in perspective. We went from 5 times your income to 10 years of more of compounding and savings, and you only have to be at 7x.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to track over that 10 years. Yeah.
It just doesn't pass the simple smell test. And it's very difficult for us because we read the news and it seems like somebody's an authority. And this is why we want our listeners, this is why we want all of our clients to learn how to do some of this basic mathing. I'm not a math scientist, but...
Not even to solve it all, but just enough math to say, does this smell decent?
Yeah. Does it? Yeah. Like, as an example, I don't know a lot about food, but even I can pop the edge of the container and know it doesn't smell right. I can't cook like
That's
Corey,
great.
but that's it. Just know enough of what, if it's good, it ought to smell like, that when you read an article like this, like when Corey and I read it, we're like, oh, it's kind of interesting. And I kind of enjoy these little parts below of like how you could successfully do that. Some of those can be great. These articles can be great because it gives you an insight, maybe a new way of looking at something, but it may well be either totally insufficient or have you led astray, which leads us to our next one. Corey, you were talking about, and this is an online calculator we're going to use. It's longevityorg.org. Corey found this. And what we're going to challenge is that, well, to have enough, we already saw the other Yahoo News article that said 78 years old. So maybe if all you got is 700,000 at age 60 and you're going to be dead 13 years after age 65, then maybe it's sufficient.
You do make a good point. It is fairly consistent amongst some of the data points that they're using. I'll give them that.
Speaking of which, I mean, this is an important side note.
I'm worried.
Like when I was a kid, there were 2 things I thought would be a much bigger problem for me as an adult. Cartoons as a kid, I thought for sure quicksand would be a much bigger problem as an adult.
Everywhere,
there's every card, people dying left and right.
Sitting on your couch 1 minute, the next minute you're just
sinkhole
deep in.
Yeah, and the other is people playing chicken. I don't know why that was a big deal. Like where 2 people running cars at each other, and one of them's got to swerve, and it's a good guy and a bad guy. And I kind of
challenges you can't say no.
Yeah, as a kid, like even before I had my driver's license, I worked out a strategy for how I would deal with it. That's how big of a deal I thought. I thought this is something you run into a few times in your lifetime. At 42 years old, haven't had to play chicken once yet. I did get stuck on a one-way road once with no, so I just reversed up it so that it looked like I was going the right way. That's as close as I've ever gotten to playing chicken. So in this case, we're playing chicken with that age. Like,
yes,
yeah, you could do it, but are you okay with the average of everybody being how you determine how long your money has to live? And living sick, even if you lived an amazing life, but you outlived your money by 6 months. So 6 months you have to live in abject poverty. There's no way you could give me enough luxury for decades to then have the last 6 months be abject poverty and like that feel like it evens out.
And what that means for legacy and the memories that you have with the rest of your family and friends.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So to that point, Corey's going to show us this that he found, which is an actual longevity calculator using things like actual insurance companies' actuarial data.
And the bottom line, and I think we could buzz through this a little bit faster for time because we are finding some good things to talk about. The article here in Yahoo Finance says that, let's see, older adults should save for retirement that could last 20 years.
Could. But when you read that, you automatically think, oh, it might last that long. Like it's an implication that 20 years is a long time.
But what did we put? We put in a 45-year-old to this actuary
It
calculator?
looks like I messed up on my math. 47-year-old.
A 47-year-old.
Yep.
Great. And what's the
Good
50-50?
I'm scrolling down. So just for husband and wife. Okay, so we'll just start there.
Yeah.
So mortality is when over half the people are dead. So I'm looking here. Age 85. We don't reach 50-50 death until age 90 for the man, and the woman's just slightly above 50-50 at that point.
So that's and when I was a kid, I thought a coin toss was pretty good odds. Mm-hmm. Like it felt that feels fair.
Yeah.
Like no, I want way better than 50-50 odds for anything I'm planning around. And there's at least a 50-50 chance that your money will have to last 30 plus years.
That's only if you're looking at one spouse or the other, one male or one female.
Right.
So let me scroll down to that one. Because that's the other thing when we're talking about this as everybody's listening, when you hear mortality, that's when half the people are dead and half the people aren't. Now, we just started with a healthy 47-year-old. Keep in mind that those stats that they pull from Social Security or whatever, they include everybody. The healthy, the sick, the rich, the poor, the guy, let's see, what time is it where we are now? 7 a.m. The guy who's literally swinging through to get his 4th Egg McMuffin already today. That guy's in that number.
Right.
This is healthy 47-year-olds.
And if you're listening to this right now, then you're at least in the top 50 to 60% of all people in the country as far as health, just from how you're taking care of yourself.
Right. And if you're listening to this while you're at the gym or on your Peloton or a treadmill, you're top. Yeah, you're all the way up there. So, Corey, we reached the 50-50 probability. Let me make sure everybody can see this. 50-50 probability of either being dead is 30%. But our money needs to last until both people are dead. So let me look out here. The 50-50 probability of both being dead is, I think they actually messed up this chart as we're looking at it, because both is lower.
No, it's that the chart is saying both living to that age. So the either is actually the longer one. Like either one lives to that age.
Got it.
So it's kind of inverted from what
both live versus either one. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So sure enough, it's 30 years from age 65. Now the man or woman might be 50-50 age 90.
Right.
But this is going all the way out to age 95 with an age 65 retirement age. You guys can run this on yourself, the Longevity Illustrator. And I would even recommend something I haven't talked about on the podcast before. It's an app I haven't looked at in a while. I think it's still out there, called Oldify.
Yes.
And so take a picture of how long you're likely to live, then knock like 5 years off, download this free app called Oldify, and look at what you look like. It's so easy not to make decisions to add fuel for the fire that our older selves need, because we're We're not them. They are a stranger to us currently. They're not somebody that we have immediate access to. We don't know them. It's a future TED problem. Yeah. I love that. Never watched the show, just learned it from Corey, but the idea of that is a future Paul problem, right up my alley. Okay. So we're going to shift gears now. So what we learned though, 78% or 78 years old is what everybody thinks you're going to live to. You're actually going to live a lot longer if you have any semblance of health. And in longevity.org, you can even get in there, longevityillustrator.org, you can get in there and add lesser health and get a good read. Right. But get a sense for the future you're working to care for.
Now, these next two bullets in the article actually go well. They're very sobering. They're very
which two in the next article?
No, in this article.
Oh.
More Americans are planning for a longer retirement is the next bullet point in this article. And the one after that is many Americans are accessing retirement funds early.
And just so I can bring this up, Corey, which of the two articles? Jaw-dropping stats or how much?
Jaw-dropping stats,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm going back to it. All right.
So they're taking the possibility of a longer life to heart, is what the article says. And then the very next bullet point is, but while they're doing that, they're also taking their money out early. And I think, that's because the financial industry trains folks to save for retirement in retirement funds. Like, it has to say retirement on the account to do anything for you for the future. And then they don't have any short-term liquidity. So that speaks to something that's broken in the model. Now, the financial industry has no reason to suggest much else because money gets locked up in these accounts for a really good long time, and they get to charge fees on it for that whole period of time. So it works well for the financial industry.
Yeah, it does work. It just may not be working for you. All right, shifting gears, we're going to talk about these mutual funds that right now have amazing returns.
Oh, you're going to that? You want to go
may
to the
not
next
be
article?
Amazing. Well, I want to. Otherwise, you're going to chew me out for taking too long. So
I think we just do two articles today because we got some good meat in both of these.
I can go for that. Well, that makes this one a little easier to transition to then. So here is this article. We're in the Wall Street Journal. Don't believe inflated yields on inflation-protected bond funds. So I think one thing we should do is define some terms before we jump into this article. So inflation-protected bond funds are often called TIPS, Treasury Inflation-Protected Securities, pay a super, super low interest rate right now. But the theory is as CPI,
which is a measure of inflation.
Exactly.
The consumer price index. It's not everything that inflates because it's a market basket of consumer goods. Going to the grocery store, those things you might buy.
Almost always a basket of goods is either directly selected by or heavily influenced by the political administration that's in power at the time. So as to not pick any recent wounds, here's an example from the past that people might be able to relate to. During the Clinton administration, they added military wages. Now, I don't know about you. I've never said, hey, I need movie tickets, bread, some carrots, and a corporal. Like, that was not part of it. But then one of the things that drug inflation down was zero movement in military wages over that entire period of time, the entire 8 years of the presidency. That is an example of how inflation itself could be manipulated. So they might be able to show 3%, even though the stuff you're buying inflated 11 that same year.
Well, think about the two biggest forces that the government employs are the military and retired people, because Social Security increases are tied to the CPI. So you think about this, there's a lot of incentives and different interests related in what that number says.
Yeah, they don't even have to be awful people to try to tamp down inflation, because the more they can get the inflation number to tamp down, the less they have to give all the inflation increases to every federal employee, all the inflation increases to Social Security recipients. So, yeah.
But also, like, here's what's not included in that CPI. When I was a kid, we finally got a computer, but we had one computer in our whole house from grade school through high school. Now, how many computers do we each have in our house? How many cell phones do we own? Like the things that we're buying and how we buy them, that doesn't show up.
I have 5 times the amount of computers we first had. And that's just the computers that we're done using that are sort of like heavy paperweights right now. So that's the basics of inflation protected securities. The CPI goes up, the principal adjusts. So you're earning interest on a little more principal, and that creates return.
So you have a low ongoing rate that's list, but then you got a kicker.
Yeah, kicker. Yeah. Yep, that can drive it up. So this is written by Jason Zweig, who's pretty prolific at the Wall Street Journal. Inflation heated up again this week. I just have to read this first line because I love it so much. But it's nowhere near as hot as funds specializing in bonds that fight it. Meaning like they inflated their returns. And if an 8% yield tempts you to join them, listen up. Hang on, I want to make sure the folks have a chance to read this.
8% in bonds feels real great right now.
If an 8% yield tempts you to join them, listen up. These funds that purport to fight inflation are ironically inflating their own reported yields. Now, the question is, how does this happen? Like, how is it that a mutual fund can actually inflate a return and look like it's a higher yield? Now, what we're used to is there's reported returns. Like in the first quarter, this mutual fund that owns a bunch of stocks returned 5%, and that's normal. Now, what a stock-based mutual fund doesn't do is then annualize that of like what we're going to earn this year.
Right.
Is 4 times 4 quarters. 4% times 4 quarters across the year would be 12%.
They can only go backwards and say, for the last 4 quarters, this is what we got, or for just this quarter. Yeah.
Yep. But now with inflation protected securities, because it's in the world of yield, they can say if that same inflation protected security got 2% in the first quarter, they're able to annualize that yield. But it's the monthly inflation amounts that are coming out via the CPI that are driving up the inflation protected securities value. And each time that happens, we end up in a position where it looks like we've got this fund that's doing really, really well. But what I was going to point to here is, there it is, tips pay interest, albeit not much these days. A 5-year note sold in April has a coupon of, now I want to make sure people don't think this is a mistype. It's not 12.5%. That's 0.125%. That is 1/8%, to put that in perspective. And websites, all that will actually do it because under rules from the Securities Exchange Commission, funds take dividends and interest earned per share during the prior 30 days, deduct expenses, and then annualize it.
But the SEC's rule for calculating yield doesn't say whether to include that inflation adjustment or leave it out, which is the crazy. Now, this is like if all contractors could choose to, make a bid and include labor or not.
Yes.
And then you couldn't compare any contractors. It's actually a lot like how hotels can include resort fees or not in their price. Like it's these weird things.
Not only is it they can include labor or not, they don't even have to say they included it or not. They just like show up and work, and then we'll just send you invoices. We'll see how you do.
And they take a 20-page bid, and you've got to go dig through to see each time if you're
exactly back. So as the economy roared back, the consumer price index in an unusually high was at. Let me clear this. Sorry if anybody was listening too close to their speakers. The consumer price index came in at unusually high levels of 0.8 and 0.9% in June. Those are monthly numbers. So the funds that annualize them and include the inflation adjustment to principal in their income have been reporting monster SEC yields. To believe that yield is to imagine that such flunky numbers are sustainable. And they give an example of a few funds. Now, this is our point. This is not a Corey and Paul are anti-tips or anti-government bonds or any of that. It's that, going back to the theme of why we're doing this weekly on the show, is to give folks the ability to know whether or not the meatloaf's gone bad.
Do that smell test.
Do that smell test. Just be able to pop the edge of that container. One more thing that occurs to me, Corey. You know the biggest difference between men and women?
You're going to tell me something that I hope is not too...
I love it when Corey like braces for like, is this where we get canceled? It's very simple. If a woman asks you to smell something, it probably smells good.
Oh, yeah, this is fair.
Yeah. If a guy gives you something to smell, I'll smell it because I'm a man. But I'll tell you right now, you owe me a courtesy sniff later.
Right.
So in that, we want you guys to know enough about money to start, when you read these things, go, 8% return on inflation securities? Like, just asking the next question, well, what have they done over the last 5 years? Or is that sustainable? Or why is it yielding that much? You know, we're going to continue to talk about this. There's something called Gell-Mann amnesia. And there's a psychologist by the name of Gell-Mann who noticed that he'd read something in his chosen discipline in a newspaper. He'd be like, those people don't know what they're talking about. Now, the people, of course, are the journalists. And he would turn the page, and then something he's not expert in. Israel-Palestinian conflict. But as soon as we turn the page, it's like total amnesia. We forget that the journalist that just wrote about the thing that we know about did not know what they were talking about.
I was going to use that as an example in my head because I can remember reading a financial article and being like, oh, no. And then I go, oh, I'm a very astute analyst of this Middle Eastern conflict. Like, no.
Yeah, and we instantly forget that the same journalist, or the same occupation of journalist, an expert in finance, is writing that finance article, and it was incorrect, incomplete, flawed, or weak in some way. And we turn the page to another article, think nothing of it. Now, we know most of you listening are not financial professionals. You're an architect, you're a physician, you're a business owner in a particular space. And you read articles all the time where you know those journalists didn't know what they were doing, or they misquoted something, you used the wrong term, but you don't know it. And so by being able to look at these articles, by being able to give it context on top of facts, Corey and I think we're going to be able to give you guys a different way to view all of the financial information that's out there. It's not bad. Even the bad stuff can be good if it changes a mindset, if it gives us a new direction to go, if it prompts a new conversation with, if you're a client of ours, one of the household financial officers like Corey and I that work with you guys, to put you in a position to have a deeper understanding, because you said, why did they say this? Pull that article out, bring it to the meeting with your advisor. And if you bring those to an advisor and you're not working with us, and what you get is shamed or poo-pooed, or all they do is crap talk about the author, then you don't have an educator working with you. You need somebody that's going to say, here's what's faulty in this thinking or what is incomplete, to let you see a larger picture. And that's why we're doing this. Corey, we just hammered through that. What if anything else we need to say before we let everybody go today?
I think it's important to, like, this article, and Jason he's written about it before, and he's a good person to be reading because he sees through these things. You can't just read what the rate of return and just accept it in a lot of these articles. Like, it's worth asking, how did they calculate that? Where did that come from? Just that one or two extra questions on any headline you read to see if it's really worth your time or worth using inside of your plan. That's why I'm so excited that we're doing this now. Right on.
Well, guys, we're so glad that you could join us today. We love and appreciate all of our listeners. Do not forget to like this episode if you're watching it on YouTube. Subscribe if you're not already. Be sure to find one of our clips that you think would be useful to somebody you know, love, or care about, and give them the gift of this additional financial education. We don't send you an invoice. We don't allow big box financial retailers to sponsor our show. We're here for you in every episode, efforting to help you design and build a good life.